When you think of the three main countries in North America, you think of the United States, Mexico, and Canada. However, when it comes to football, Canada has been an afterthought throughout the entire region. But things are changing. Hey fellas, I know the last video essay was, while ago. At this point, I am never making promises again. Just expect a video essay in like a month or two, and we'll just go from there. Also, if we could get this video to 10,000 likes, that would be absolutely spectacular. The first ever football match in Canada was based in Toronto between Carleton Cricket Club and Toronto Lacrosse Club in 1876. A year later, the first ever National Football Association outside the British Isles was formed, the Dominion Football Association, which only lasted 4 years. However, in 1880, the much more successful Western Football Association was formed in a city now known as Kitchener. The WFA operated in all towns and villages west of Kitchener. One of those towns, Aylmer, hosted the first ever international game in Canada in 1888. The Western Football Association was founded by David Forsyth, the father of Canadian football. Forsyth was also an avid lawn bowler, but I'll be honest, I think I prefer the other kind of bowling. He also founded the even more successful Ontario Association Football League in 1901. The OAFL gave birth to Canada's greatest ever club, Galt Football Club. They won the Ontario Cup 3 consecutive times and even won Olympic gold in 1904. Galt FC a year later played a team of British amateurs called the Pilgrims in a match billed as being for the championship of the world. Genuinely sounds like a third grader came up with that name. Before the match, controversy was ignited due to differences in how the game was played by Canadians. Rules in Canada were a little different. Unlike the English game, Canadian rules allowed players to be quite violent. Nonetheless, the game still went on and ended in a 3-3 draw. The WFA and OAFL weren't the only associations that were formed during this period. The Manitoba Football Association and Newfoundland Football League were founded in 1896, the Saskatchewan Football Association in 1905, and both the Province of Quebec Football Association and Alberta Football Association in 1911. Shortly after the formation of the last two, the provincial associations formed together to give birth to the Dominion of Canada Football Association in 1912. The Canadian Soccer Association, as it is now known today, was recognized by FIFA that same year. Canada sent a national team to play its first official international match in Australia back in 1924. The Maple Leafs the very next year played the US in Montreal and won 1-0. They'll probably want to forget the return fixture though. Again, the Canadians toured the Southern Hemisphere in 1927, where they played 22 matches including 4 friendlies against New Zealand. However, in 1928, the Canadian Soccer Association withdrew from FIFA over a dispute regarding payments to amateur players.
We want more money. Yeah, more money.
More money from where?
The Canadian FA rejoined FIFA in 1946 and took part in World Cup qualifying for the first time in 1957 under head coach Don Petrie. The Maple Leafs began the qualifying campaign with an explosive start beating the US 5-1 in Toronto. Unfortunately, 2 losses in Mexico meant the Canucks missed out on World Cup 1958. Canada would have the opportunity to qualify in 1960. Oh wait, they withdrew before the competition even began. Canada returned to the fold during World Cup 1970 qualification with Paul Tinsdale, where they couldn't even win in Bermuda. Tinsdale was sacked soon after. The Maple Leafs in 1974 World Cup qualification would see similar results with their first ever foreign manager, Eckerd Krautsoon. Luck changed in 1978 World Cup qualifiers, however, when Canada defeated the US in a playoff tiebreaker to advance to the final round of qualifiers for the first time ever. Unfortunately, that was the end of the road, with Le Rouge finishing 4th in the final round. Krautsoon left after the campaign and later won the DFB Pokal with FC Kaiserslautern in 1996. In 1981, with Canadian Barry Clark as head coach, the Maple Leafs again made it to the final round of World Cup qualifiers, where they missed out by just 1 point. Following the departure of Clark, Englishman Tony Waiters took the helm. With his leadership, a pragmatic defensive approach, and a golden generation being cooked up, the Canadian football scene finally had something to be excited about. In the 1984 Olympics, the Canucks managed to reach the quarterfinal, where they lost on penalties to eventual finalist Brazil. But just when things were on the up, a shadow of doubt loomed over all of Canadian football. The association was on the brink of bankruptcy, and in 1985, the North American Soccer League went extinct. Because there was no official Canadian league, only a couple players were quality enough for Europe, while the rest were forced to make a living in the major indoor soccer league. But the spirit of Canada wasn't gone. Despite having a handful of amateurs in the squad, the national team advanced to the final round of World Cup 1986 qualifiers. After 3 matches played, Le Rouge only needed just 1 point against Honduras at home to qualify for their first ever World Cup. Having already played in Honduras before in the scorching heat of Tegucigalpa, where they won 1-0, the nice Canadians became the rude Canadians, and selected King George V Field for the return fixture fixture as revenge for years of searing hot temperatures in Central America. King George V Field is located in St. John's, Newfoundland, the easternmost city in North America. St. John's is the windiest town in Canada, with wintry days even in late spring, and gusty cold weather was nothing but a mere tale like Santa Claus to Honduran players, as they were forced to practice in a gymnasium. For Honduran away supporters, it was a logistical nightmare. From Tegucigalpa to St. John's is 8,000 miles. To make things even worse for Honduras, the away supporters bought flights to St. John, New Brunswick, 1,800 miles from the actual destination. So with no time to change course for the game, it meant King George V Field was 100% filled with only Canadian supporters. The match began, and a breakthrough came early in the 15th minute when George Pecos blasted it past the keeper. Prior to these qualifiers, Pecos was a water meter reader who was initially called up for the 1984 Olympics when only amateurs were allowed. However, FIFA changed that rule right before the event, and Pecos was kicked to the curb by Canada. But then he got his break in fall of 1985, when one of Canada's star forwards got injured just a week before the beginning of the final round of qualifiers. During the qualifier in Tegucigalpa, Pecos came off the bench and silenced the Honduran crowd, scoring the game winner. Canada would hold on to the lead until the 49th minute when Honduras pegged it level. But then in the 61st minute, 20-year-old Igor Vrablich sealed the deal for the Maple Leafs, sending the entire 3,500 capacity into a frenzy. With the entire association on the brink of economic collapse, qualification meant Canadian football was saved. Canada were considered the most disproportionate side in the whole of World Cup 1986. Only a couple players were in Europe, most were in an indoor league, and some were just amateurs. The Canadians' time in the tournament was short-lived, losing all 3 matches and scoring not a single goal. However, thanks to Tony Weir's exceptional defensive tactics, Canada only conceded 5 times against very strong opposition. Prior to their opener against the 1984 European champions France, everyone was betting on the far superior French to score 6+ goals. But instead, France struggled and only managed a late Jean-Pierre Papin winner. Michel Platini later after the match even praised the Canadians for the way they played. Even with Tony Weir's departure after the tournament, the future looked bright for Canada's so-called golden generation. After the 1986 World Cup, Canada participated in an invitational called the Merlion Cup, where they advanced to the semis and were pitted against North Korea. However, before the fixture, a group of Canadian players consisting of Hector Marinaro, Chris Chuden, Dave Norman, and Igor Vrablich agreed to throw the match for a share of $100K. Canada went on to lose the match 2-0, and everyone collected their earnings. But another player involved in the scandal by the name of Paul James returned the money and reported the incident to the Canadian Soccer Association. Paul James left scot-free, while his teammates weren't so lucky. Dave Norman eventually came clean and made a return to the national team years later, as did Hector Marinaro, although Chris Chuden never played for the national team again. The same was said for Canada's most promising starlet, 21-year-old Igor Vrablich. And just like that, a promising group of underdogs ready to improve upon their progress and take on the world for the years to come was abruptly ended due to the selfishness and greed of a couple wasted talents. Qualification for World Cup 1990 lasted just 2 matches. However, under the guidance of head coach Bob Lenarduzzi, Canada made it to the final round of World Cup 1994 qualifiers. The Canucks then finished second and advanced to the Intercontinental Playoff to face Australia in a 2-legged tie. Canada won the first leg 2-1. However, the Australians fought back in the second leg to force penalties and then went on to win the shootout. Ironic that Canada was owned by England, eh?
When is it gonna end, Robbie?
Lenarduzzi and the aging Canadians went at it again in 1998 World Cup qualifying. The campaign showed promise when the Maple Leafs went unbeaten in their 3rd round group, but then in the final round, the squad was sent to the retirement home. Come the new millennium, the Canadian Soccer Association sought out another German coach in Holger Osig. The next competition was the 2000 CONCACAF Gold Cup, which consisted of many top CONCACAF sides and guest nations including Colombia, Peru, South Korea. Wait, what? Since the birth of the tournament in 1991, Canada had failed to reach the knockout stages every time. They even withdrew from the 1998 edition on the eve of the tournament due to financial constraints. Le Rouge came into the 2000 Gold Cup as the worst ranked nation, but nevertheless advanced out of their group after you not, they won a coin toss against South Korea. Next, the Canadians had to play the mighty Mexicans in the quarterfinals. Fullback Ramon Ramirez found the breakthrough for Mexico in the 35th minute. To this day, he is still Mexico's most capped player. Things continue to go wrong for Canada when their top scorer in the tournament, Carlo Corazon, had his testicles reduced to atoms by Rafa Marquez. But who needs balls to score? Not Corazon, that's for sure, as he headed home Canada's equalizer in the 83rd minute. Then in extra time, Canada went from one side of the pitch to the other with a blistering blistering counterattack finished off by left-back Dick Hastings. Okay, well his name is actually Richard, but I'm trying to stick to a theme here. Hastings' only goal for Canada ever was a golden goal that shocked the Mexicans and sent the Maple Leafs to the next round. In the semi-finals, the Canucks defeated Trinidad and Tobago thanks to the heroics of West Ham's Craig Forrest, a man who embodied his last name with huge stops including a penalty save to help Canada reach their first ever Gold Cup final. The Canadians then completed their miraculous run, defeating Colombia with goals from Jason DeVos and Carlo Corazon to win their first ever Gold Cup.
And there is a picture to behold, folks.
Carlo Corazon won Golden Boot of the tournament with 4 goals, and Craig Forrest was rightfully crowned MVP. The goalkeeper conceded just 3 goals throughout the entire tournament and even saved 2 penalties. Because of Canada's triumphant run, they earned a place in the 2001 Confederations Cup, where the Canucks finished bottom and didn't even score once. Canada were also invited to the 2001 Copa America in Colombia. They initially were to participate, however, due to some outside threats, the tournament was originally cancelled and Canada sent back its players to their clubs. But then the tournament was reinstated, however Canada were no longer able to participate. With the success of the 2000 Gold Cup, the Canadians had high hopes for World Cup 2002 qualification. However, Mexico and Trinidad stomped on those dreams. Canada again had a great performance in the Gold Cup in 2002. The Rouge made it all the way to the semis, where they were eliminated by the United States on, you guessed it, penalties.
Damn.
The next year was another Gold Cup, but the Canadians will probably want to forget this one. However, the tournament would be Holger Osik's last as he resigned in September of 2003. 2004 would see the association hire Frank Yallop as head coach. His tenure didn't last very long though. Canada failed to advance to the final round of the 2006 World Cup qualifiers and then crashed out of the group stages of the 2005 Gold Cup. Yallop resigned a year later in June 2006. Canada turned to interim head coach Stephen Hart from Trinidad. He gave Canadian football a breath of fresh air with his more modern approach to the game as opposed to the dull and uninspiring football the Maple Leafs had been used to. With the help of Julian de Guzman and Dwayne de Rosario, the Canadians advanced to the knockout stage of the 2007 Gold Cup. Dwayne de Rosario in particular was having an exceptional 2007 for his country. He scored 5 goals in 8 games, the most in a year for any men's national for Canada at the time. De Rosario has won 4 MLS Cups, 4 Canadian Player of the Year awards, and was all-time top scorer for the national team with 22 goals up until just this year. But we'll get to that part later. Canada took care of business against Guatemala in the quarters, which meant a chance at revenge in the semis against the US. The Americans took an early 2-goal lead in the first half, but then Ian Hume brought one back for the Canadians in the 76th minute. Then with time expiring, Atiba Hutchinson slotted in Canada's equalizer. It was then wrongly called offside. Former 86 hero Dale Mitchell took over as head coach after the tournament. He had previously been assistant under former coach Frank Yallop, and just like Yallop, his tenure did not last long. Mitchell's outdated tactics and a group of deaths sent Canada nosediving out of the 3rd round of World Cup 2010 qualifiers. He was sacked soon after. Stephen Hart returned as head coach, eventually becoming permanent head coach. Under his helm, Canada made it to the quarterfinals of the 2009 Gold Cup, but his golden magic ran dry in the 2011 edition. Canada failed to make it past the group stages, scoring as many times as unranked Guadeloupe. However, with Hart back at the helm, his aesthetically pleasing football attracted youngsters from all kinds of backgrounds. Hope was once again in the air. In 2014 World Cup qualifiers, Canada breezed past their competition in the 2nd round, conceding just 1 goal. Stephen Hart's expressive football continued its great form throughout the 3rd round, and with 1 match remaining, Canada needed just a draw in Honduras to reach the final round. Simple, right?
Leaning a bit to the back post.
Long gone were the days of Tegucigalpa. Welcome to San Pedro Sula, motherfuckers. Canada was embarrassed 8-1. It was their worst defeat since 1993 when they conceded 8 against Mexico. But here's the thing, and this might sound off to most. Canada's embarrassing result was the best thing to happen to this association, because it finally ignited calls for change. For years, the Canadian Soccer Association lacked professionalism needed to catapult a team towards the World Cup. As a result, players were often hesitant to accept invites from the national team and even flat out rejected them altogether. To them, traveling away from their clubs to play for Canada was just an inconvenience. The CSA was also too dependent on grassroots funding. Because of this dependency, coaching development in the country was severely lacking. 14 to 15-year-olds coming into Canada's national program were at a disadvantage disadvantaged with the lack of proper coaching. Victor Montagliani, who had just become president of the CSA months prior, recognized these problems and started working on improving the association inside and out. Under Montagliani, Canada became more professionalized, depending less on volunteers and more on the well-being of players. Way back in the 2007 Gold Cup, starting keeper Greg Sutton suffered a concussion during practice. A team doctor never accompanied the national squad, and as a result, Sutton was cleared by a local physician. And because of this, Sutton then later suffered from post-concussion syndrome. He was not able to play for the rest of the year and barely played at all throughout the next 4 years once he did return. Incidents like this were to never happen again under Montagliani's presidency. Montagliani also focused on improving the national team by landing more sponsors to improve resources. In general, the CSA changed their attitude to be more commercial and corporate, which improved travel, accommodation, and more importantly, coaching. With the resignation of Stephen Hart, Canada hired Spaniard Benito Floro in 2013. Having managed the likes of Real Madrid in the early 90s, expectations were pretty high. However, the early stages of Floro's tenure saw some of the darkest days for Canadian football. 2 days after Floro's appointment, Canada lost to unranked Martinique in the Gold Cup. A week later, Les Rouges crashed out of the group stage with just 1 point and 0 goals scored. Canada also went winless for nearly 2 years and even suffered a 958-minute goal-scoring drought, which was finally ended by Atiba Hutchinson in a 1-1 draw versus Bulgaria mid-2014. With morale in the grave, Canada entered World Cup 2018 qualifying listed 122nd in the world, their worst ever ranking. Nevertheless, Les Rouges defeated Dominica 6-0 on aggregate and then Belize 4-1 on aggregate to advance to the 4th round. The Canucks would then experience some deja vu when their qualification campaign came up short after a 2-1 loss in San Pedro Sula.
You can't keep getting away with it!
In 2015, Canada for a second consecutive time went not only winless, but scoreless in the Gold Cup. Benito Floro was sacked a little over a year later on September 14, 2016, and although many won't look fondly on his time as head coach, he did lay out the groundwork for Montagliani's other huge project, the recruitment of dual nationals. For years, Canada's lack of professionalism and overall stature had dual nationals turning the other direction. Many will point out Julian de Guzman's brother and Carpi FC legend Jonathan de Guzman, who opted to play for the Netherlands. But another big one was midfield maestro Owen Hargreaves, who was considered back in the late 90s as the best player to come out of Canada. However, Owen didn't even acknowledge the existence of Canada when it came to football.
Please play for Canada.
I don't even know who you are.
He initially played for Wales youth teams and then opted for England in 2001. Times were changing, however. No longer would Canada be ignored. During Floro's tenure, he was able to attract Steven Vitoria, who played for Portugal, and Scott Arfield, who made appearances for Scotland's youth teams. Jamaica expressed interest in Junior Hoylett, but in the end, he opted to play for Canada too. Another huge positive to look at during Floro's tenure was when Canada hosted a qualifier versus Mexico at BC Place Stadium in Vancouver with an attendance of 54,798. A record attendance for a Canadian national team of any sport. The game was surely growing in Canada. The question was, could the national team keep up? After head coach Octavio Zambrano guided Canada to its first finish outside the groups in the Gold Cup since 2009, he was let go and replaced by Canadian women's national team head coach John Herdman. Herdman was responsible for turning around the entire New Zealand women's program in the late 2000s. He guided the U20 squad to the U20 World Cups in both 2006 and 2010. With the senior team, he helped the Kiwis qualify for the 2007 and 2011 Women's World Cups, as well as the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Then in 2011, he was named head coach of the Canadian women's team. Prior to meeting the squad, John Herdman in his own words said,
"I'll take you on the aeroplane that I jumped on because I decided to come to Canada. I lived in New Zealand, I've got 2 Kiwi kids, and I'll tell you, I had a great life. But I jumped on this plane and absolutely shit myself."
Canada's women had just come off being embarrassingly eliminated in the group stages of the 2011 Women's World Cup. They were a broken team, and for the first time in Herdman's coaching career, he felt vulnerable. Was he really going to be able to save this team? A team with one of the greatest ever players in Christine Sinclair? I mean, if she couldn't do it, how could anyone? Before Herdman could be understood by the team, he needed to understand what Canadians were like. So he turned his eye to the national anthem. Every day one is free to choose glory, and what Herdman noticed was that these women were blaming everyone but themselves. And in order to grasp glory, one can't let something else determine their destiny. Once those women finally took responsibility for the disaster in Germany, John Herdman told them to live above the line. 80% or better, normalcy and mediocrity was no longer good enough, only abnormality and high performance on and off the pitch. And after After all this, Herdman took a broken women's team and led them to the quarterfinals in the 2015 Women's World Cup and 2 bronze medals in the 2012 and 2016 Olympics. The announcement of Herdman's appointment as men's head coach caused shockwaves throughout the entire Canadian football scene. There were many questions that needed answers, but unlike everyone else, the Canadian Soccer Association were fully confident in their decision. They were so confident that they also made Herdman responsible for all age groups from under 14s upward as the men's national director. He would not be the lone man working youth development though. A few years prior, the Canadian Soccer Association announced 2000 Gold Cup hero Jason DeVos as director of development, a position that funnily enough had never existed prior to his appointment. DeVos's main goal was to eliminate the "we've always done it this way" mentality that was holding back Canada and think about development on a global level. What are the best countries in player development doing right now? What principles can we take from those methods? And how can we build a successful long-term plan? Although this wouldn't be easy. Canada is huge geographically, meaning there's plenty of challenges different provinces face, the biggest one being climate. In order to learn more, DeVos traveled to every province to understand how football worked in each region and what challenges they faced. From there, he'd help support these regions in finding solutions for kids growing up playing the beautiful game. On top of all this, the Canadian Premier League's introduction in 2019 allowed even more pathways and opportunities into the professional game for every youngster in the country. Now the only options to play professionally weren't just in Toronto, Vancouver, or Montreal. However, there is still room for improvement for player development in Canada. When it comes to cost, it is a pretty similar situation as football in the US. Playing for a club varies between $600 to $2,000 USD in Ottawa alone. Although there are programs that help tackle this issue like Free Footy, a free program in Edmonton that allows kids from grades 3 to 6 to play football against each other. Ottawa-based Eagles FC in 2017 established itself as a full-blown club comprising nearly 60 newcomers to Canada, including immigrants and refugees. From day one of Herdman's tenure, Canada's national team was no longer just a vacation for unwinding. Right off the bat, he wanted to beat the country's largest ever victory against the US Virgin Islands to be in CONCACAF Nations League qualifying. Not everyone in the squad was sure about that message, but a bullish Herdman kept true to his values. To him, if someone wasn't willing to climb the mountain and push towards abnormality, they didn't deserve to play for Canada in the first place. Herdman also carried on Canada's essential dual nationals project. He recruited the likes of English-born Ike Ugbo, US-born Ayo Akinola, and spent more than a year convincing Portuguese youth international Steven Eustáquio to switch allegiances, coaching the men's team not only tactically but mentally, managing every age group vital to the development and future of Canadian football, and convincing dual nationals to opt for Canada. This was so much, yet Herdman was working day in, day out to make sure each of these tasks were done diligently and properly for maximum success. Bringing in this little Englishman was by far the best thing to happen to the entire Canadian men's program. However, there is still one part of this transformation we still have yet to talk about: Canada's new crop of exceptional and promising talent. Sigma FC's Kyle Larin, Tajon Buchanan, and Richie Lariah have all developed into great pieces of the puzzle. Tajon and Richie have recently impressed enough to earn moves to Europe, while Kyle last season was tied second for top scorer with 19 goals in the Super League for Besiktas. Then we have the bigger guns, the Wonder Kids. In 2017, a 17-year-old Jonathan David playing in an Ottawa-based league had one goal in mind: play in Europe. Denying the option of joining a North American academy, the kid with 2 first names was talented enough to move to Ghent right after his 18th birthday. In 67 appearances for the Belgian club, David scored 33 goals, which earned him a €30 million move to Lille, where his 13 goals helped the French club to their first Liga title in 10 years. And after starting this current season hot and announcing he'll be leaving Lille this summer, Jonathan will be making a big money move very soon. Finally, there's superstar Alphonso Davies. Born to Liberian parents in a refugee camp in Ghana, Alphonso and his family emigrated to Canada for a better life. Davies stood out at an early age and played for his elementary school and local club in Edmonton. He then discovered his team was participating in the aforementioned Free Footy program, and as Free Footy mostly consisted of marginalized youth with tough family backgrounds or limited finances, this helped kids like Davies compete against good players at other schools that they usually wouldn't play against. However, Alphonso not only played football, he was a basketball star and a track and field star. At age 14, Davies joined the Vancouver Whitecaps Youth Academy in 2015. He made his professional debut for Whitecaps 2 in the United Soccer League at age 15 years, 5 months in April 2016. A month later, he scored his first professional goal, making him the youngest goal scorer in USL history at 15 years, 6 months. In June 2016, Davies made a debut for Vancouver Whitecaps, and then a month later, he signed a first-team contract, becoming the youngest active player in Major League Soccer. Following an impressive start to life in MLS, a lot of European clubs were paying attention to this young phenom. In the 2018 MLS season, the left-back scored 8 times and assisted 9. During that season as well, Vancouver agreed to a historic €22 million transfer of Davies to Bayern Munich in January 2019. This move was absolutely groundbreaking for the Canadian football landscape. No one had seen anything like it before. Davies made his Bundesliga debut in January 2019, being subbed on as a late substitute. 2 months later, he scored his first goal in a 6-0 win against Mainz at 18 years, 4 months, and 15 days. The 2019-20 season was Alfonso's breakout season though. After making his first start on matchday 9 of the Bundesliga season, there was no turning back. One of my favorite Alphonso Davies performances was when he single-handedly put Chelsea in a pretzel in the Champions League. And who could ever forget when he game-ended Nelson Semedo. Davies made a total of 46 starts for Bayern, helping them win a historic treble that year, becoming the first Canadian men's international to win the Champions League. Alphonso Davies' success for Bayern has changed the Canadian football landscape forever, and for everyone. An immigrant that came to Canada for a better opportunity was able to become a top-quality player in Europe and the best in his home country. Kids today who may not have the best of financial situations or family backgrounds are now able to see themselves in Alfonso. If Fonzie can do it, they can too. Herdman's first major tournament with Canada was the 2019 Gold Cup. Les Rouges made it out of the groups, but then bottled worse than Spurs against Haiti in the quarterfinals. However, much like the Honduras loss, Canada took this as a learning opportunity. Herdman started to understand his players more and learned who he could trust in the dire moments. The Canadians also took a different approach to their playstyle, with a more attack-minded and aggressive setup. They'd used this system in a CONCACAF Nations League match against the US in Toronto. Prior to this fixture, Canada had not beaten the US in a competitive match in over 34 years. They also hadn't scored a goal against the Americans since 2007. Herdman wanted to surprise Greg Berhalter's US team with high pressing. The Canucks' main goal that night: suppress the engine and make sure Michael Bradley couldn't get running. And they did just that. Canada shocked the continent, defeating the US 2-0, and this marked the turning point for the team. The US eventually got their revenge in the return fixture and then went on to win the whole competition. But Herdman and the Canadians were focused on the bigger prize: World Cup qualification. All the way back in February 2019, Herdman vowed to bring the Canadians back to the World Cup in 2022. Having not qualified in 30 years, this was an extremely bold statement. However, if you've learned anything about John Herdman in this video, he lives and breathes the extreme. Every single player under his guidance would willingly run through walls for him. In March 2021, World Cup 2022 qualification began with Canada in the first round demolishing their competition. A 4-0 statement victory against Suriname sent them to the second round, where they played Haiti in a 2-legged tie. Kyle Larin gave the Maple Leafs the advantage in the first leg. Then Bridgeview hosted the second leg, where the Canadians won in comfortable fashion to advance to the final round of CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers for the first time since 1997. Unlike previous years with the infamous Hex, this year the final round of CONCACAF qualifiers consisted of 8 nations. This was due to a format change made a year prior in 2020 due to COVID. And thank God, because the original format for World Cup qualifiers was the stupidest thing I had ever heard of. The original format, introduced back in 2019, was based entirely on FIFA ranking. The top 6 would be placed in a round-robin final round that would determine 3 nations automatically qualified. The rest of the CONCACAF nations, though, would be placed in a mini-tournament consisting of a group stage and a 2-legged knockout stage. The winner of said mini-tournament would then play the team that finished 4th in the Hex in a CONCACAF playoff round before the Intercontinental playoff. So yeah, thank that changed. Prior to the beginning of the final round, Canada had just come off reaching the semis of the 2021 Gold Cup, the first time the Maple Leafs had reached that stage since 2007. In their first qualifier of the final round, the Canucks began their campaign with a 1-1 draw versus Honduras thanks to a Kyle Larin penalty. The Maple Leafs then traveled down to country music hell and grabbed a massive point against an American side still struggling from an identity crisis. Canada went on to end the window with a more than convincing 3-0 victory against El Salvador thanks to the likes of Jonathan David, Tajon Buchanan, and a certain someone we have still yet to talk more about. Atiba Hutchinson is an unsung hero who seems to get overlooked whenever we talk about Canadian football. Hutchinson has been playing in Europe since the age of 20 when he joined Swedish club Oosters. In 2006, he joined Copenhagen and played every Champions League match that season, grabbing the attention of many clubs. He became the first Canadian to win the Danish Superliga Player of the Year in 2010, which earned him a move to the Netherlands. Unfortunately, during his time at PSV, multiple injuries in a short 18-month span significantly hindered Atiba's progress. That didn't stop Hutchinson though. His resilience helped him persevere through his hardships. Eventually, Hutchinson moved to Turkish club Besiktas, where he became one of the most recognizable athletes in Turkey. He is absolutely adored by Besiktas fans and has even gained the admiration of rival fan bases. Atiba is known as the octopus in Turkey because of his long, skinny legs that can spray passes in every direction. The Canadian midfielder has won 3 Super League titles with Besiktas, and even though he no longer plays the same minutes as before, the Turkish fanfare has not died one bit for the now 39-year-old. But despite all the recognition he's earned abroad, his accomplishments were barely noticed by Canadians back home. During the 2000s and even the early 2010s, football was a mere afterthought in Canada. Oftentimes matches lacked capacity, and hell, there hadn't been a domestic league in Canada since 1992. In Hutchinson's words, "You're playing for your country, but they're not really behind you." But what about today, where football is larger than any sport in Canada? Well, now that his best days are gone with the wind, most fans are focused on Canada's next batch of incredible talent entering the fold. Atiba's won Canadian Player of the Year 6 times, yet his achievements have not been celebrated anywhere near enough in his home country. It's an incredibly tragic tale of a Canadian who knocked down walls for generations after him. And he's been through it all for the national team, from the 2007 Gold Cup when his goal was wrongly called off, to the nightmare in San Pedro Sula, to even those dark days when Canada was ranked 122nd in the world. If there's anyone who deserves way more love and appreciation, it's Canada's most capped player of all time, Atiba Hutchinson. To start the October window, the Canadians held Mexico to a draw at the Azteca thanks to a Jonathan Osorio equalizer. For the next fixture in Jamaica, Canada grabbed their 4th draw of the campaign and followed that up with a 4-1 mauling of Panama. At the end of the October window, the Canucks had 10 points after 6 matches, placing them 3rd in the table. In the next window, Les Rouges played 2 matches and won both, which included an emphatic 2-1 victory against Mexico in Edmonton. It was the first time the Canadians had defeated Mexico since that infamous quarterfinal in 2000, and Kyle Larin's 2 goals in that match brought his tally to 22 goals for the national team, which now had him tied for 1st on Canada's all-time top scorers list. The Canadians ended off the year undefeated in qualifiers, placed 1st in the octagonal. Now all of a sudden, those bold statements by Herdman back in 2019 were looking less like dreams of grandeur and more like reality. Late January would see Canada wipe away all memories of agonizing defeat after agonizing defeat with a 2-1 win in San Pedro Sula. The nightmares were finally over, but the difficulty of that window had only just begun. Next was the long-awaited United States at home match, but this time there would be no Fonzie to spin the entire American side. However, the Canucks stuck to a defensive shape, fending off the lackluster American attack. And once it was time to pounce, the Maple Leafs capitalized every time. Canada prevailed 2-0 in the end, with Kyle Larin becoming Canada's all-time top scorer. A win in El Salvador a couple days later gave Canada all 9 points, maintaining their spot as top dogs with qualification just 1 more win away. And so, on March 24th, 2022, in San Jose, Costa Rica, the Canadians had the chance to create hit. Yeah, party's gonna have to wait. Costa Rica turned God mode on. And so, on March 27th, 2022, in Toronto, the Canadians had the chance to create history and qualify for the World Cup for the first time since 1986. 13 minutes played, Kyle Larin bagged Canada's first of the night, which was only the beginning of the Maple Leafs' perfect onslaught of the Jamaicans. Later on, Buchanan added to the tally, then Junior Hoylett, and finally an own goal sealed a 4-0 victory for Canada. The final whistle then blew, and the entire stadium exploded into delirium. Players, coaches, and staff rushed the field, all of whom had experienced the toughest of times in one way or another, and now here they all were, as a collective celebrating with tears of joy. In the past, flags from around the world flew proudly during each World Cup, but never would one see the famous red maple leaf. Now all you could see was a flood of them flying through the cold winter, foreshadowing the festivities to come in November, as realizations of Canadian hopes and dreams had finally come true. Canada are going to the World Cup. According to the United Nations back in 2020, Canada has 8.7 million foreign-born residents. That's 21% of the country's population and the 8th largest immigrant population in the world. And nothing screams Canadian more than this national team, one which embraces that emerging diversity within the nation. They're a group of many players with unique cultures and backgrounds that were welcomed with open arms from day one. Jonathan David was born to Haitian parents in Brooklyn, New York. Atiba Hutchinson was born in Brampton, Ontario, Canada to Trinidadian parents. Goalkeeper and iconic pantsman Milan Borjan was from Croatia, born to Serbian parents. At an early age, he left during the Croatian War and settled in Canada. Richie Laraya was born in Toronto to Ghanaian parents. UK-born Samuel Adekugbe and Ike Ugbo were born to Nigerian parents. Junior Hoylett to Jamaican parents and Stephen Eustachio to Portuguese ones. Many of these stories have a very similar theme in that these players and or their families came to Canada for a better life. And after years of discovering their passion and being helped through supporting and developing it, the Canadian national team has become the symbol of belonging to one's nation, no matter where they were born. With Canada going to the World Cup, people across the planet will be exposed to the beauty that is Canadian multiculturalism. Kids of every background at home will be able to see themselves in this team going to Qatar, and future generations will be inspired to keep going in their own dreams of creating history. There are some very exciting times ahead for Canadian football. And so, the rise of Canada is done and dusted. I just wanted to say a massive thank you because a year ago, I wasn't even doing this type of content, or at least consistently. I was starting to transition from FIFA career mode to basically just football content, these like football essays and stuff. When I started doing that, I was terrified. And back then, I would have never expected it to do as well as it has. So, thank you so much. This is really just a dream come true. I'd like to give a shout out to some people who did help in the process of research. These people answered any and all questions I had and even helped me with some pronunciations here or there. So a big thank you to Creative Freights, JJD TV, and Rabona TV. But of course, a massive shout out to all the patrons that allow this to be possible, including Andre Root, Janos Balash, Milia Way 009, Alex Rod, Antonio, Daniel Ortiz, Dark Wolf 476, Ethan Scaraccio, Francisco Hernandez, Jason TD, Joseph Bonfante, Nguyen Din Min Tang, The Motor Drive, Victor, Ariel L. Floor, Declan Malloy, Emmett Shea, Lewis, MX Weeb, Piano, Tomicus, Alberto Azamar, Andres Was Never Here, Big Bird, Billy Jack Jory, Cash Getty, Chris Damasceno, Dios, Exo, FIFA America, It's Nolfo, James Huggett, Jose Moreta, Ken Ramirez, Mark Morgos, Mohamed Albakale, Nicholas Baptista, Nickel Chips, President Pulsek, Quinn J. Rose, Tyler Avon, and Unbroken Persona. If you'd like to join the Patreon, there'll be a link down below and up in the annotations. You can follow my Twitter if you'd like, follow my Instagram if you want, follow my TikTok, trying to get to 8,000 there, and of course, you can follow my inactive Twitch, which I'm hoping to make a little more active during the summer, but we'll see. But until then, I'll see you guys.